Call this meeting to order. Generally do roll call, please.
Tom McDonald,
Here.
Anita Matt,
Present.
Jennifer Finley. She is at the Medicine Tree. Jim Molitor,
Here.
Carol Langford, Len Tooties,
Here.
Bing Matt, Ellie Bundy,
Present.
Martin Charlo. He's online, but he might not be able to hear me. Mike Dawson,
I'm here.
James Steele Senior.
Jen. Can I ask Anita to lead us in a prayer this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Creator, thank you for being with us through the night. And we pray that you're with us through the day. We send prayers out there to our elders and our children and grandchildren and those who have been sick and lost loved ones. I pray for my colleagues here today and their families, and that we can make good decisions for all of our membership. It's beautiful weather out there. We're coming into spring and new hope. We pray for also those that are in this terrible war that we have going on around us. And all of this in your name, amen.
Anita. We have our minutes from April 5th for your consideration and approval. Go ahead, Anita.
On page 2 of 5, Abby, where I mentioned a Facebook post that I shared with council and that she would like Dan McClure to provide an update. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Martin.
Thank you. I hope I'm coming through okay. On the voting for, I'm not sure what page it is, and I'm on my phone, so I apologize. The vote on SKC, can I just take out my statement? Because I think, well, at least the Dunn's part, because I know I actually went and looked at that. And SKC's actually got a different Dunn's number than we do, so I was actually wrong. If you want to leave it in there as me being incorrect, that's fine too. So, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Is there any other corrections to the minutes? Motion by Lynn to approve the April 5th minutes with corrections. Second by Jimmy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, show of hands in approval of the minutes with corrections. Bing abstaining, unanimous. Okay, we have our agenda. We're going to shift a couple of items around. We're going to ask Ruth to come up early. We don't have any walk-ins. Is there any other additions to the agenda?
I have one for open, please.
Okay, Ellie has one item. Mike?
Yeah, Mr.
Mike has
Chair.
one? Okay.
Okay.
Mike and then Jimmy? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just want to bring up something that was given to all council that he was in here this morning checking on.
Oh, yeah.
So
Sure. We'll make sure everybody has received that and had a chance to look at it. And I have one quick item from a gentleman that is making a special request. So any other additions to the agenda? Seeing none, motion by Len to approve the agenda with additions. Is there a second? Second by Anita. All those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous, I think. Yep, unanimous. Okay, so let's see, quickly, Ellie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a call this morning from the St. Ignatius Fire Chief Reese Bailey. I serve as a member on that department, and we have an ISO inspector coming to go over all of our training documents and things next week. But the ISO rating is something that sets taxpayer rates in communities, and the chief is requesting if tribal council would consider allowing us to count all of the tribal hydrants in that reporting. If so, we would just need to know the size of the tower that feeds those hydrants, the size of the water main, and then once a year, our fire department would take on responsibility to go out and flush the hydrants and do flow tests on them. There's really no downside to.
I would assume that, thank you for your service, first of all, Ellie, for being a volunteer. I would assume that Arlene Fire District is providing fire suppression support for our structures and our buildings. That's correct.
This would be St. Ignatius.
I
but
mean,
yes.
St. Ignatius,
Yeah.
St. Ignatius, my bad. I don't see a downside. I think it'd be very appropriate and it should be counted in their audit or inspection. Anybody else feel any different?
Yeah, did anybody notify housing that the fire department's using the water to fight fire?
That might be against our code, huh?
Yeah, no.
Is it council consensus or do you want an action for that, Ellie?
I think this is fine. I'll check back with them over break, and if we need something more official for that, I'll come back with it.
Every rural and community fire district volunteers we're depending on that service and we support them. So for St. Ignatius, definitely every one of them. Consensus of council to proceed. Okay. Thank you, Ellie. Mike?
Mr. Chair,
Oh, no, go ahead.
I just want to say you might want to add that to the list of all the other stuff the tribes do to make sure that everybody benefits to that level, since we keep a list.
Mike.
Actually had a handful of interesting discussions yesterday, and to start with, I was left with the question of where we are with the institutional review board that we're supposed to be putting in place for the tribe. Had an interesting conversation with Nikki Graham, and she was relating that one of the research projects that we okayed not too long ago is pretty sketchy, and the IRB at the college doesn't have the same responsibility to look at the issues that we need to look at. And so I'm wondering where we're at in the process of getting that institutional board in place. She was relating it was a research project dealing with nutrition and suicide, and that there were no mental health people involved in this research. That could be pretty sketchy. So I'd love an update on where we're at with getting that position. Then the Forest Advisory Committee met yesterday, and I wanted to let you know that they're working on the forest management plan. So that if you got an interest in looking at all the different issues that are part of the forest management plan, they'll be working on it. And I was highlighting that we needed a stronger component dealing with economics in it. And so I'm hoping that'll happen. And then I also had a meeting with Macy yesterday, and a couple highlights there were that Macy wants to emphasize getting out the word to all the superintendents that tribal students have the right to utilize regalia in public ceremonies. There's a Montana law on the books basically for that, and people are still being denied the use of regalia, and so they're going to push that issue with OPI and the Board of Public Education. And then the second issue that was really interesting was looking at Class 7 recertification. They want to eliminate the tribal chair's responsibility in certifying that renewal of Class 7 certification. And I voiced an opinion that no, I did not want to see that happen, that in fact, the language is changing so rapidly, and we need to have control of who our teachers are, that we need to be party to that review process. And so they amended the change they were trying to make. The problem is that there are certain tribes that are not responding when people are trying to renew their Class 7. And so they wanted to remove that hurdle. So they have language to remove that hurdle, except when a tribe actually comes forward and puts process for that review process and that reinstituting that license. So it'll be on us to actually have something in place to demand that we are a party to that renewal process. So those are my updates.
Thank you, Mike. That's your input in the Class 7 recertification is very important and very appropriate. So appreciate that. On the our institutional review board status, we can have Brian and Chelsea come in and do an update on that. We'll coordinate that. So thank you for that. Is when they were referring to the public schools and tribal regalia, was that on our reservation or is that other places in the state? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Let's see. We got. Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
I vaguely remember the discussion that we had on the IRB. So were we asking the legal department to work and put that together? Okay.
Yeah, Brian started it and then Chelsea was finishing it up. Yeah. So we'll get a status report on that for everybody. Go ahead, Carol.
Hey, Mike, who was it that brought that proposal in?
Which one,
The
Carol?
one you mentioned that didn't have the mental health.
I don't know. I haven't looked back at our process because we did okay something not long ago dealing with nutrition and suicide. I don't know who was presenting that project.
I was just wondering if Root Martin's not here, he's online. I wonder if contracts and grants caught that, and did we have contracts? Because that used to be a normal part of the process is you need to get contracts and grants approval. Would they have caught that, I wonder? Martin, do you know?
So who knows where they were contracted or granted. It wasn't through a grant from us or for us. It was an outfit just wanting to do research on the reservation. And Nikki said there's a lot of researchers out there that are hooking using the tribal hook to get a lot of money to do some really sketchy kinds of research.
Yeah, the federal law requires for human research studies that you have to, your proposal, I mean, this is graduate work and PhD research type stuff. And, you know, learning institutions really do a lot of this, but each institution will set up their own review board, and you're required by law to get approval from one of those anywhere in the country. And we have the option to set up our own, let all the researchers know if they want to come to our reservation, do human research, they have to get approval from us. Absent of that, all they have to do is get that same thing from whatever institution they're working with. It could be University of Notre Dame or wherever. And so that's what we were trying to do, was protect us even more, protect our cultural resources and our people from being, you know, exploited. Exactly. So we'll get an update on that. Thank you. Jimmy?
Yeah, I just wanted to give an update on that district meeting last night. You know, it was well attended. I wanted to apologize for my part. I didn't present my part very well, but I've been kind of secluded for a few years, so I'll get back into it. I'll get my speaking up better out where I can address people better. But what I really wanted to do is I really wanted to thank Chairman McDonald and Carol Langford and Martin Charlotte for attending, and Martin doing the great job he does to get that thing going. I really appreciate the support because, you know, being real first time and being real nervous, I really depend on you guys. My heart goes out to you. I appreciate that. I appreciate the people coming and voicing their concerns about the issues that are going on. Had great presentations by Jay Smith on the Cape Canal, Dan McClure on the issues with all the restrictions we have now for non-members, and Will Mestis and Louis Fiddler for their drug presentation. I think it's really important for people to understand how that works and can recognize it in their own family. I think that it's happening in my family, and I try to address it, but you know, it's hard to get people to understand when they're in use. You know, they just don't want to hear you. But at some point, I hope it does, because I almost had a close relative die 2 weeks ago over this fentanyl. And in fact, they even had the priest come in, but she's pulled through it. But it's a scary thing. I mean, no more so for, you can lose your family, you can lose your member, and people of your family, and that's the scary part. You know, we've lost enough of that, and all these prayers that council do for our people, man, I hope it combines and works, because that's all we can offer is our support, our prayers, or and what we can do. And so I just want to thank you all for supporting in these meetings, to get the information, and I just limit.
Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you for the great meal your family prepared. It was wonderful and set a pretty high bar. Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to mention in one of the elders meetings, they talk about why don't we just open up our district meetings and have a full discussion? Well, a lot of these issues that come up at district meetings are things that happen here, and we realize that we need to get the information out to the public. So I appreciate we continue to, let people talk at these, give the programs an opportunity to get their message out. So yeah, thank you for doing that.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, I just, those guys are so good at what they do, and very professional. Give the information the way it needs to, and hopefully people will really listen to them because they know what they're talking about. And and again, I forgot to mention to thank my family for preparing the meal. My wife, my daughter, and my niece. They kind of combination put that together. But I think it's just so important to hear these guys, and they're I really thank you to them.
All right, Anita.
Thank you. And I do agree with Carol about having agenda items. It's good to open it up to the public, the last hour or so, and let them talk about their issues. But there's things that we learn up here that I would never know outside of it's been brought in here. And that's the only way to educate and let people know about the issues, what's really happening. So one of the things, Calvin Bordeaux was in this morning, and he left these on our desk here. It was back March 20th. And I kind of felt bad because I don't think we ever addressed any of what his issues were, but he talked about minimum wage and rights of the tribal membership and water rights, economic development, and explaining settlements, per capitas and the casinos. So I don't know how we want to address this, but we probably should say something to Calvin. But anyway, he was in this morning, so I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. I know I've had one-on-one conversations with Calvin last night and again this morning on a lot of the issues you brought forward, which are great, and appreciate that. So, Jimmy?
Yeah, Chairman Donald, Council, same thing. I've had one-on-one with Calvin and he's got some good issues, some things he really wants to hear about. But I think what he was looking for was each council person to read what he's got going on and just kind of reach out to them if they have anything they want to talk about on it. So I think that's his big issue, but he come in this morning because he left his folder at the meeting and he asked me if I found it. I got it, so.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Jennifer for the help that she gave us on that district meeting last night. If it wasn't for her, we probably wouldn't have had the people there to present their issues that they presented last night. She did a lot of work, and I called her and told her that, talked to her with, if we could get a hold of Dan and Jace and who's the other one? Anyway, I called her and talked to her and she did a great job of getting a hold of everybody and getting it all set up for us. And fortunately I wasn't able to make it, but hopefully next time everything will be better. But I just want to thank her, for the job that she done for us up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Bing. Just one quick thing that I was reminded of last night at the district meeting was there was a request quite a few years ago with the passing of Chairman Pablo, and one of those was the naming of the existing visitor center at the Bison Range after Michael Pablo. So I didn't have any real knowledge of that other than what the individual mentioned to me. So I think if that's a commitment the previous council had made, that we may want to follow through with that or consider it and probably consider it before our event in mid-May. So I just want to bring that forward for you to think about. So with that, we'll move to Ruth. Come on up. Or, well, no, we're squeezing you in first, and we're going to bring in the expert, the other expert, a little bit later. Who is that guy back there? Vern, good to see you. Okay, Ruth, go ahead.
Next, Kisa Whitnam. Been a long time since I've been in the chamber, so bear with me.
Really good to see you without a mask.
Got really used to it. But Jennifer, I cannot find my documents. Yeah, I don't see where my place is, Jen. Where's my share? Oh, where? Sorry. Okay, cool, Ruth. Thank you. All right, we'll begin with the easy stuff first. A couple of requests for capital equipment. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yep. Where's your district document? No. I already opened it.
Okay, we're starting on page 136, and it's a request approval for capital equipment for the Bison Range. If you can see that.
There we go. Thank you, Jennifer. It seems like every day we're doing something with Bison, typically the Bison range. So Division Manager Whisper Means is requesting approval of capital equipment for purchase of skid steer and a post pounder, and they're going to trade back a 16-year-old Bobcat towards that purchase. So the net increase or the net cost is going to be $60,000. We'll accomplish that through the current budget and not require an increase to the general fund.
Fence is pretty important to keep up. So yeah, older equipment, you just have it wears out and have to replace it. So it's a pretty versatile tool. Anita?
So Mr. Chair, I'd make that motion to approve the purchase of the Trimble GO7, right?
No,
No,
that's, sorry.
that's the next one, sorry.
I scrolled ahead, sorry. The
Moved it
skid
on
steer and
me.
post pounder.
Purchase of capital equipment for the Bison range. I'm sorry.
Motion by Anita to approve the capital equipment purchase of the skid steer and post pounder. Second by Ellie. Any further discussion? All those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment on that. Just sitting here thinking about the process, the procurement process. I'm not sure if it would allow this, but I think in these types of situations, when we have equipment like this, we should give the membership an opportunity to bid on that. I know there are some businesses that could use equipment like that, and just something to think about. I know we haven't done that in the past, but just something different. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Go ahead, Ruth.
All right, page 137 then, request from the Water Compact Program or Division of Engineering and Water Resources actually, but for the Water Compact activities is going to be a GPS unit and at the estimated cost of $8,500. And just like the Bison range will accomplish that through the current budget allocation, will not require an increase to the current budget.
Motion by Mike to approve the capital equipment request for Trimble.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Second by Ellie for the purchase of capital equipment for the Trimble unit. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous. Go ahead,
Okay.
Ruth.
All right. Beginning on page 139, we have the fourth quarter fiscal 21 financial report. And as I start drafting this report, it usually occurs right after the end of the actual fiscal year. But because we're going through closeout for the annual audit, our year-end statements can take some time to actually get final. So it was really fitting that at the time I chose this photograph in October, it was 16 years since we'd participated in the first roundup with Fish and Wildlife Service. And it had been the service's assertion that we needed to continue to involve volunteers. And so we did just that under our first self-governance agreement. And at that, you see that maroon baseball cap, that's the profile of Whisper Means. So she was a wildlife biologist at that time. She's now the division manager of Fish, Wildlife, Recreation, and Conservation. So she's now directly overseeing Bison Range as one of the many programs under her. Of course, in the center is Game Warden Tom Haynes and his wife, Gloria. And to the right side of that picture is Charlie Hansen, who is one of our tribal volunteers also. Really proud to share that with you. Oh, also at the left, you see the dark head left profile is Sheila Matt. She served as the first Bison Range coordinator. So in recognizing all of the many efforts that went on for decades, literally, and I'd like to remember those folks that had direct hands on the ground and feet on the ground at that time. Kind of looking at fiscal 21, of course, we begin right out of the gate mentioning how we got the implementation of the Montana Water Rights Protection Act. We mention that because it's setting up, first of all, FY21 is year one of the water compact. That's how we see it in financial management, so that we're keeping track of each year going by and the distributions from the Treasury on our annual amounts due under the settlement. So that's why we want to bring that up and keep that at the forefront of pretty much everything the tribe is doing from here on out. And that kind of goes without saying. This settles 40 years of effort by the tribe, great financial and human resource cost, almost to the day, actually. In December of 1980, Clayton Matt was hired as our water rights administrator. So the Montana Water Rights Protection Act was signed in December of 2020. It's kind of, again, you know, noting and taking note of all of the people who played a role in that last 40 years, pretty monumental. So I like to bring that up as well. COVID-19, we cannot go through any reference to 2021 without COVID-19 coming into play. First of all, because of the impact of the pandemic, the actual impact on people. We actually saw a decline of net enrollment for the tribes. We had a decrease of 66 compared to 2020 December, 2021 December. So that means even though you had, say, 20 new enrollments, your decline was more than that. That's only happened 4 times in the last 37 years. I've been tracking the enrollment trend, obviously because of per capita estimates and other needs that tie to enrollment. The COVID-related funding that's been coming in first came under CARES Act and then under Coronavirus Relief and Supplemental Appropriations in 2021 and the American Rescue Plan Act in 2021. So at the time of the fourth quarter, a little over 114 million have been awarded through Treasury, Department of the Interior, and Indian Health Service. And those plans have been sort of in a continuing effort for allocation to refine and design what priorities those should be addressing. Rescue Plan Act is under a time frame of December 31st, 2024 for obligation. We could actually expend beyond that if we were incurring that obligation prior to that date. And so just like the water compact, we're seeing that the COVID-related issues for funding and so on will continue to be reported here. And in the middle of last year, council had approved the reorganization of executive level functions and created those new positions, which are really not that new to old horses like me. The system that's set up is fairly familiar to what I've worked under for several years now. By the end of October, we had all of the positions filled, and kind of concurrent with that reorganization, council had passed its 7 resolutions. And we see those as the guiding principles for resource allocation and reporting of progress and accomplishments to see that we are actually meeting those strategic priorities. So moving now into some of the details. And as I said, don't intend to lead you through every single inch of this. But in total revenue, obviously we had a big increase, in total revenue from 2021 over 2020, total of 199 million. I thought it was interesting, it was just below 200. I make little guesses with myself as to how much revenue I think we'll be recording for a fiscal year, so I was pretty close. Q4 was 68.4, and the year to date expense was 183. The overall change in revenue was 13%, so not a huge increase. As we get into the types of that revenue, starting with the tribe's general fund, actually we have 9 individual funds there at the bottom of page 4. The one that we call Fund 02 General Fund is our treasury and our local, and all the others are all the different revenue that is not that treasury and local. So we see in the change in general fund, we actually had a decrease of just about 5%. But the increases that are pretty notable are in enterprise dividends, which increased 45% over the prior year, and gaming also, which increased almost 100% over the prior year, having paid its $1.2 million dividend compared to its $550,000 the year before. Even though third party is showing that it decreased, in 2020, we had a one-time receipt of adjustment revenue of 8 million. So that decrease is really not an actual decrease in collections for the activities that they're billing for. It's just showing that there was a difference in the revenue amount. As we look at projected revenue, and this is something that my former boss, Mr. Claremont, could attest to, I do a lot of sweating over projecting revenue because you have to really be on solid ground with what you're projecting and what you put behind that. So I'm really thankful for the guidance that he was able to provide me. So in general fund, as I said, that's projecting treasury and local revenue, and programs that are generating the bulk of that is going to be obviously the dam rental, which as council, you fix that rental under agreement with Energy Keepers. So that one's very simple to project now. It's the 18 million annually. And then there will be the leasing revenue and treasury or timber stumpage revenue that has to be received through treasury. So of the projected 21.2, we actually brought in almost 25. So that was a welcome increase and a variance up of 16.8. Dividends increased, or actually did not increase much over what had happened in 2021. This is really simple because I actually wait for the declaration of the dividends. So I'm generally like right there. There was a small increase because there was an agreement by, I believe it was electronics, to make an additional earmarked revenue deposit for Boys and Girls Club. Indirect cost assessment, that is one that is intentionally rather conservatively projected because we don't want to be over. And so that one came in above its projection. All of the other, as I said, revenues in total are 121% of projected. And so we feel positive about that. Contracts and grants, net revenue there year to date, just under 128 million. Contracts and grants has always been about 2/3 of our total revenue, and that is actually changing upward because we're getting more and more federal funding, as you can see there. Fourth quarter, almost 51 million compared to the prior year, though it was a decrease. Remember in 2020 is when we had gotten the CARES Act and other one-time increases of revenue. The federal contracts and grants called OAB, that's the Treasury ARPA, and that's, again, reflecting big increase over the prior year. Our self-governance agreements have always been at least 1/3 or more of the total compacts, contracts, and grants revenue. And so this year it's actually just a bit over that at 38%. The settlement fund, those are going to be your, what used to be called CUR mitigation, now we call it SKQ mitigation, but our financial system still records it as CUR. And also the Clark Fork Super Fund. That is no longer going to be a fund of report in your annual audit, but we're going to continue to do that in your quarterly reports. Moving to total expense, there at the bottom of page 6. For the year to date, it was 183.4 million, and total variance from last year up almost 15%. So generally, of course, your expense should not be too far ahead of where your revenue was. And as I already told you at the beginning, your revenue was over expense by almost 16 million. Breaking it down by those fund groups, in general fund, year to date, general fund was almost 53 million. Compared to last year, though, it did decrease a little bit, almost a little over 4%. Contracts and grants was up quite a bit at 23% for a total of over 127 million. The settlement also was up just a little bit. We're looking at salaries. This is a portion of expense that we will focus on quite a bit in future reports. And I think you'll catch on to why as I explain that a little more. In the fourth quarter was just under 17 million, and the year to date was just under 54 million. Compared to last year, it's gone up just under 5%, which is, I think, is a normal increase. But as we get into implementation of pay scale in this fiscal year, you'll start seeing those changes, and we'll start noting how quarter to quarter and year to year, those salaries are going up. Contracts and grants is the one that really takes up the greatest load of that, almost 2/3 of all salaries. And that's accounting also for the increase from the prior year. In contractual, we pick on your resolution fostering business ownership among tribal members. So we're looking at contractual expense. Fourth quarter was just under 4 million, and the year to date actual was almost 26, and it increased quite a bit from the prior year. We saw a lot of contractual expense in government services, and that's where CARES Act primarily had increased over 6 million from the prior year. But natural resources is really the majority of that contractual of 12.5 million, and almost half of all of that year-to-date actual. And that is occurring in safety of dams primarily. Looking at by vendor, there were almost 400 vendors in that actual expense, and tribal members are totaling 148, or over 1/3 of those. The payments to members totaled just over 4 million, or 16% of the total. But of about half of that 4 million, that was for those business relief grants. So it was not for activities that they were contracted for the tribe. The tribal council budget operating expense, tribal council is staying well within its budget. And this is one that's also makes me real nervous, because I'm the one that prepares your budget. So it would not look well for me to be reflecting an overexpended budget, because that means I didn't estimate very well. Percent expended was only 86%, and you actually had a decrease from the prior year. This is a budget that half of it is expense to general fund, and the other half we can put in the indirect cost pool, because at least half, I say, is your effort is geared toward the government's administration. Because of the way I estimated meeting costs, I had believed there would not be in-person meetings because of COVID-19, and also because 2021 is an election year. You cannot expend tribal resources for your electioneering. So that budget of 10,000 was just for quarterly meetings, and then that was almost double in expense, so about 20,000. And then similarly for this fiscal year, due to ongoing COVID-19 a year ago when I was doing the budget, I just kept it the same. So you'll start seeing in your 2022 reports, we're probably going to have over expenditure in there as well. But in total, that's really what we're going to look at. We can always adjust and reallocate amounts by the line items so that they're not showing in the red. The far right is showing pretty much negative decreases from the prior year, which is very expected. So of that total $974,000 budget, as I said, it was underspent from the prior year by 9.4%. Okay, now just kind of a little look into the future, if you will. And again, this is tricky. Times I wish I could see the future more clearly. I guess the takeaway, to go into fiscal 22 and closing out 21, the volume of funds that have come in has just grown just significantly in the past 2 fiscal years. And with all of that, of course, is increased activity, but also increased load on governmental administration. I have pretty much in looking at indirect cost pool budgets, as well as your budget and budgets of your support staff, they've all increased to take on that additional load in administration. One of the things in financial management we see across the organization is the need to have training of the staff that are carrying out financial management. It contributes quite a bit to our audit preparation. If we are having to correct, reconcile, and adjust our recorded entries because programs are not on time or accurate, then it creates additional time and additional work and delays that final audit process. And so the other thing is going to become how we strategically allocate resources. It's great that we have a large volume of funds and a great deal of very significant one-time historic level funding. So it requires us to really look at that and identify how we can achieve what is most important to us. On general fund, which is what the tribe has the direct control over, it's really not changing, and that's been a trend in place for several years now. We actually saw some flattening in revenue sharing. That is one that from the time we started, it had done nothing but go up. But we start seeing, because of the pandemic, there was decreased gasoline sales in the state, and that's the big one that drives what goes into revenue sharing. Conversely, the alcohol tax revenue went up, so it kind of almost offset that. So I see that as rather interesting and maybe even concerning. Beginning of this fiscal year, Energy Keepers came forward with its second dividend of 4.89 million. And as you were discussing whether you should increase those recreation permits, created quite a bit of discussion. And just to remind you, that is about 1% of your total general fund. So whether you did it or not would probably make hardly any difference at all. And then finally, last November, the passage of the BIL, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, is appropriating the $1 billion for water compact. That in and of itself really sets up a greatly increased level of optimism for where we are now and where we're going to go in the future.
Ruth, did you have any, you know, I guess you really didn't, you couldn't, I guess, but revenue sharing for marijuana may be a factor, I guess. I don't know.
Yes.
The sales are just outstanding right now.
And we're going to, they are going through the roof, or they're sky high, as they would say.
Going up in smoke.
I actually am tracking the monthly sales, and I understand we made that request to the governor and his staff to begin that, and it would be retroactive to January 1st. So we would for sure hope that that would, you know, bring in some welcome addition to revenue sharing. Let's see, where was I? The contracts and grants, as I said, still remains the federally funded, and that includes the compacts under self-governance. It's 2/3. We've had that, I think, tremendous infusion, not only just through the regular awards, but through those CARES Act and ARPA. And we, I think, had some good opportunities. The one big outlay that you set up for the Indian Health Service side is to finish Ronan Health Center. So along with your highway department compensation that they started awarding, I think it was last year, we've been able to allocate almost 7 million of that IHS ARPA money towards that clinic. And that should more than cover it, along with a $1 million award from IHS for equipment once the building is finished. There's also identified amounts that came through for addiction and mental health, and also upcoming facilities funding for sanitation facilities through the BIL and also through the regular IHS. So water compact, BIL, all of these dollars coming in. Again, we just want to leave you with the notion that effective strategic planning for these historic resources is really what we would advise. And again, implementation of pay increases across the organization. The reason we keep bringing this up is pay is what we call a fixed cost. The only way you get rid of it or reduce it is to lay people off or reduce positions. Would not see that that would be the solution necessarily, but sustaining those with available resources is really the challenge. The one that I visit with Greg a lot about is general fund and the compact with BIA. General fund revenue, as we just noted, it doesn't change a whole lot, and we get concerned about certain sources of it, like revenue sharing or dedicated trust. The compact with BIA, you don't get any more money in your self-governance funded programs unless Congress appropriates a heck of a lot more. I've been drafting comments on the 2023 appropriations for Interior, which is where our Indian Affairs funding comes out of, have some very vast and optimal comments that go to, if you want to really help us do our job effectively and meet trust responsibility, you have to pretty much give us a 100% increase in what we're getting now. So we'll see how far that goes. That was after participating in the Tribal and Interior Budget Council consultation that was held last month. And tribes are basically tired of saying, this is what we need. It's coming from a basis of we're sovereign nations. Many of us have treaties. These are obligations that are due us. And it's not because we're needy or it's needed. It's because you need to pay it. So I think that us as a self-governance tribe and mentioning trust responsibility, it does mean if you want us to perform this at the standards you're requiring, you need to fund and provide that accordingly. So with that, any questions? And I always try to keep the report to 10 pages or less.
It's a great report, Ruthie, and what I would like to, I know we're missing Jennifer. She's not here today, but I think for us that are, well, new council members, we appreciate this kind of information and certainly would love to call you back in to have, especially as we're planning strategic planning. I think you're a critical component in that, Ruthie. So I appreciate your report. It's really thorough. I appreciate your crystal ball.
Thank you, Mr.
And the trainers that have trained you. So
well, they had to put up with me, actually. I just want to say one thing else, Mr. Chairman and Council. I am scheduled for Tuesday to bring in your FY 2023 report of general fund revenue. So that request is in the hopper, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and post that in my budget team so that the preparing officials can also see that. And so that'll be your first view into what we're looking at next year. Madam Treasurer asked that I just proceed directly to the council and not have to schedule it with budget committee. So I appreciate that.
that's
Streamlining.
that's very efficient and good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I know we'll have more for you when you come back in.
Right on.
Any
Thank you
questions
so
for
much.
Ruth? Great job. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda, we have Miss Ironmaker. Come on up. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today. I appreciate it. I'm going to keep this very brief. My name is Cinda Ironmaker. I am an enrolled member of the Blackfeet tribe, but I also have ties here to CSKT. My grandmother on my father's side was Mildred Lozel, who was from over here. So yeah, it's good to be back here. I haven't been here for a while. The reason that I'm here today is that I've always believed that it's very important to keep good relations with the tribes. And one of those is like when we are working in on any part of Indian country, I think it's important that we let leadership kind of know what we're doing. It's kind of knocking before you enter. You don't like strangers to come in and start digging around and leadership not know what you're doing. So I think it's important that that we, in order to keep up good relations, that we kind of introduce ourselves and know what we're doing here. The rest of my crew had to go on because we did have a 10:30 appointment in Arlee, and this is the earliest that we could get on. So today I brought with me the Chef Ann Foundation. We're going to be working in Arlee today and tomorrow. We will be working with Shelley Fyant and Patrick Iwaki. And the Chef Ann Foundation, their mission is actively supporting school districts nationwide through grant programs and providing tired and tested tools for school change. We just came from Blackfeet, and one of the things that Chef Ann Foundation does is help provide grants for salad bars, and funding for like other tools in the kitchen that may be hard to come by for underserviced areas. We were with the boarding dorm over in Blackfeet, and I think they're going to be working on trying to get some equipment there for them as far as a salad bar. So basically what it is that we're here just for introductions to kind of see where they can fit in and how they can help. We were scheduled to meet with the immersion school, but the immersion school doesn't have classes on Friday, so we kind of missed them, but we will definitely be reaching out to them. It's not only the schools that we will be working with, we will be working with the diabetes programs, the WIC programs, and if you have any other programs that you might want to mention to me, I'll leave my card and some of the information that we can reach out to them. I also wanted just to briefly touch on the Epidemiology Center that the Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council has. And the Epidemiology Center addresses the public health priorities of the tribes by tribal public health communication, community health profiles and data reports, data and technology assistance requests. So if you have any data requests, please reach out to us. I know we have the subcommittee, tribal health subcommittee that we work with Carol and of course, Lynn. And the last thing I would like to, we will be leaving, I'll leave this here with you, but it is the tribal health conference that will be coming up in August. And we would like to invite you all to participate in that as well. I will leave like a little bit of this information. But like I said, when we're working in the country, it's always best to keep up good communications with leadership to make sure that you know, we're not just out here doing something that you're unaware of.
Thank you, Cinda. Thank you for the courtesy and information. We really appreciate it. Any questions for? Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cinda, are you making contact with Two Eagle River School?
I'm sorry?
I was wondering if you're making contact with Two Eagle River School with the
You know,
Chef Foundation.
We would have liked to do so many other schools, but our time like really limits us because we have to do it during a lunch program. You know, like when you go into Sam's Club and they have the samples, that's basically what she's doing today. She's going to be putting out like healthy food samples. One of the things that she learned while we were in Blackfeet, of course, that it's very expensive to eat healthy there. And some of the ingredients that may be available like in Boulder or wherever she's from, we don't have that in the stores here. We have to go 100 miles just to get like some of the ingredients. So she's going to be working with recipes that are available in the stores that are on the reservations. So yeah, but we would have loved to work with them and hopefully we can. We did reach out to them. I don't remember why it was during that time we were not able to make that connection, but we will be reaching out to like a lot of the schools to hopefully fit into their schedule.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Cinda.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Vern, come on up. Good to see you.
That's correct.
That's correct. And son, yes. Sons?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
See, we finally got someone at the table better than you, Vern.
Desktop.
So,
Minimize that,
yeah.
What?
close that.
Okay, quick break.
Yours is-
Go ahead.
Oh, good, you guys, yeah.
Quick.
Then you can have it however you want when you get home.
Okay.
I'm gonna do a quick little break so you can move it to the.
Okay.
the brain
Couple
wash.
minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes.
Good, how are you doing?
I'm not even going anywhere. I'm right here. I'm leaving at 10:30.
It's all ready for you.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started, Vern. Good morning again.
Yes, Quext. We are Raven Consulting, my son Jeff and I, and our third party, Jason, was not able to make it from Seattle this morning. So the two of us will do our best to carry this forward. This project is your feasibility and business plan for a meat processing plant. We originally started out and the information we'll try to get through today. We'll give you some background in the project, give you some information on the workforce and educational opportunities within the state, cover some surveys that we've prepared and sent out to producers, processors, and grocery stores. Cover 3 scenarios that we've designed and built for feasibility studies, the market analysis that we've done, and then a summary report. Primary purpose of the meeting today is to give you an informational update on where we're at, and also to determine which scenario you would like to move forward with. Once we provide the feasibility information to you, I think that'll become clear. And then we will go back and, with your blessing, we will go back and do a business plan and prepare that for you. The information we're covering today is limited in the amount of time that we have. So we'll cover a lot of information today. Rest assured that we have a lot of documentation that will be coming in our summary report at the end of the project, along with the business plan that'll give you and any readers of this study the documentation of where the information came from, the estimates came from, people we contacted, our resources, and a host of sites that'll give readers the information of what rules, regulations, and requirements there are in concerning red meat processing plants. So we started out by creating some surveys. Let me get off to the wrong page here. I want to give you a little bit of background in some of the regulations and requirements of meat processing. In meat processing, there are 4 different categories of inspection. Custom exempt is one of those. Custom exempt only allows the processor to do slaughtering and processing of meat products specifically for the owner of the animal. So they cannot do any sale or retail or wholesale volume. So most of the processors here on the reservation operate under custom exempt. So they are the ones that do the majority of processing just for owners. Custom retail is another category that they can operate under. What the retail exempt shops can offer is they can do, obviously, they can do processing for the owners of the animal, but they can also purchase USDA or state inspected carcasses or boxed meat for their retail sale. So they can do wholesale and retail in addition, but it's limited in what they can do. Their wholesale volume can never exceed more than 25% of their overall sales and production. Then you go into the state. The state has an inspection process. Under the state inspection process, the requirements for operation are as stringent, are required to be as stringent as USDA. The exception is under the state inspection, you're limited to retail and wholesale sales within the state boundaries that you operate in. So you can't go outside. You couldn't produce and sell outside the. Then you go to USDA. USDA is an inspection criteria that allows you to sell wholesale and retail outside of the state, so you can cross state lines. And it also includes several foreign countries that we have agreements with to be able to sell under the USDA label. We have a number of individuals that we have contacted during this process. In the Denver regional office, I've talked to Dr. Van Hook, who is the Deputy Regional Director of Region 15. Montana State is under that region, so the USDA representative in the state of Montana is a Dr. Legg. He's supplied a number of answers to some of our questions regarding state. And then in the state, Gary Hamel is the individual from the Montana State Inspection Program that we've talked to. These people are very informational people. They're great resources, and helpful in this process. Next, we'll go into workforce and education. As we began the surveys of producers and processors, primarily processors, the one criteria that kept coming up that all of them indicated is that in the state of Montana, they find it very difficult to hire skilled butchers and trainers. And if they do hire them and do on-the-job training, they find a hard time retaining them. It's not an industry that is real welcoming, I guess, for most employees. It's cold. You're in cold. You're dealing with heavy loads and so forth. So it's difficult to get people employed. So we looked at within the state of Montana, what programs are available for training. The Montana State University Northern in Havre is working on a program to develop curriculum, which would be a degreed curriculum for butchers, cutters, and also inspectors. And that would be great. In talking to Mr. Kruger, who is the Dean of Technical Science at MSU Northern, he indicated that they are currently working on a feasibility study for the school. They want to be able, before they can offer the curriculum, they need to know whether or not there are enough students interested in taking that curriculum to make this, to allow the school to move forward. He does not believe that's the position of the school at this point, that it's unlikely that they will be able to offer this course. It's been tried, but there's just little activity as far as interest in taking these courses. So he referred me to Miles City Community College. I contacted Miles City Community College. Kimberly Gibbs is one of the agricultural instructors there. She's worked a lot on this program. We were given the actual curriculum that they take. Their educational opportunity there is not a degreed curriculum. It's a certification process that they go through. And part of what they go through is an internship. So students that take these classes, there are certain classes they have to take. They also have to go out and spend so many weeks in each processing facility that the college has lined up for internships. That would be, if this tribe goes forward and produces a processing plant, that would be an ideal contract to get into with Miles City Community College, so that you can get some of those students rotating through your processing plant. It not only gives them the idea of the processing plant being here, but it gives you an ideal opportunity to see what those students have and what their capacities are and what their interests are, so you know ahead of time before you start hiring people what they're capable of. So
one question, was there any indication, I know like right now there's this Congress is really focused on the monopoly out there and major meat processing. Is there new money coming for expanded?
There's a lot of money out there right now. There are several grant opportunities right now, but they are really short time framed. There was one that came out in March, towards the end of March. The deadline is the middle of this month to submit. And in a meeting that we had that I participated in, listened to, with the University of Reno, Nevada, they were putting on a presentation. So that presentation had some of the Washington, DC individuals that covered this. The projects right now that they're looking to fund with the first round of this grant is designed to expand the small local capacities. And those opportunities are really open just to people who are shovel ready. You had to have the project completely ready. They did indicate that they're going to have a second round later this year, but they don't know exactly when. There are several other sources of funds that are going to be coming out. They've indicated that there are additional monies that are going to be coming out for expansion. There are funds right now that are available for processing plants to move up to state or USDA inspected certifications. So that'll give some opportunities. We know of at least one location here. M&S Meats is in the process of moving into that USDA inspection category. So they're looking at a fairly large project up in the Flathead area. And then they've opened up an office, retail office down here in Polson. So that would be one. When we did the surveys, we were looking at the surveys to try to get information about, is there a supply of animals here on the reservation or local area what is that supply? What are producers doing and how are they operating? We sent surveys out to processors to determine what inspection category they fell under, how they did their processing. We asked for like rates of charges and fees and things like that, volumes that they did, what species they dealt with. Most of those came back. Most of the producers do a calf, what's referred to as a cow calf operation here on the reservation and in the local area. What that means is those animals, when they're sold from the ranch, are not slaughter ready. So in one of the meetings with the producers, it was recommended by the producers that somehow that be dealt with so that you don't have to change the operational structure of local producers to carry their animals over and impact their revenue streams. So they're set up for fall and early winter revenue streams. Holding them over to the following year would for most of them would create some problems. One of the opportunities that might strike up here that was recommended is for the tribe to either have the plant purchase the calves in the fall, carry them over and get them grass fed and ready for butcher the following year, or to create an additional business under the tribe to do that process. So it could almost be like a feedlot or a finishing project. You'd put most of them out in the summertime and feed them up on grass and get them to butcher weight. And then that business operation would sell to the plant. That creates a little cleaner operation. You can make different certifications on your label if that's the process that you work through. It also gives the operators, the producers out there, a much more stable opportunity, because they'll know how many units that purchaser is going to buy per year. So they're not risking carrying those animals over the winter and then the next summer and then not having a sale place for them. So that's not a part of our contract, but that's an interesting concept that I think might be very useful to develop into the future. We also contacted local grocers, and what I was looking for there is volume. How much do you sell through here? Where do you get your red meat products, and would you be interested in producing from a plant that the tribe would create? And the answer to that was yes, they were all interested. Right now, most of that meat product is coming from out of state. There's a fairly significant number of them that purchase out of Spokane warehouse or the other distribution, American Food Services and others like that. So that was an interesting concept that we found in there. We actually contacted them by phone and talked to each one of them to determine what they were looking for. Some of the results from the surveys from the producers point out that there are a sufficient number of animals here on the reservation to support a small USDA inspected plant. The USDA inspection gives you a number of opportunities that opens or broadens your market. You can sell out of state, you can go to other markets. You can also sell to some of the retail exempt facilities that operate here on the reservation because they are looking for USDA slaughtered animals. And we'll cover that a little bit more in detail. Yeah, I think then we'll jump into the feasibility studies, and I have copies of the feasibility studies that we'll go through. We have 3 different scenarios.
Before I have to leave at 10:30, but I wanted to remind council that you do operate a fish processing plant that is distribution everywhere. So you are in the business. And I would like to add that, I'm in strong support of value-added products and locally produced items here on the reservation, especially when we think of the enhanced irrigation project and how we can make ag even where it's tribal ag even more beneficial and empower small tribal operators businesses with this type of a thing. So I just want to make sure that council knows I'm pretty supportive of anything in this direction that we can provide, food sustainability, opportunity for individual tribal member, businesses and locally grown produce. I mean, I hate to think I'm buying a steak coming from Nebraska. It just really bothers me, and so I'm one of those people who buy a steer and have it cut up and put it in my freezer. But go ahead, Bert. Sorry.
Thank you. The primary purpose of feasibility study scenario number 1 was to look at the purchase and operation of a mobile slaughter unit. Those have been popular in the past. I believe they're losing their popularity for a number of reasons. In some locations, they're very useful. In other locations, they don't operate quite so well. We took a look at scenario 1 just primarily to find out, okay, what is the operational cost and the financial investment into one of these plants and what can you hope to get out of it?
I'll just go ahead and go over the number side of this. So when you look at these mobile slaughtering units, about the average cost of the unit itself, based on the capacity of what you want to use it for, is just going to be shy of $500,000. So up front, you've got a huge capital cost that you're then going to have to try to make up from your revenues. And if you're just going to be operating a mobile slaughtering unit, your revenues in scenario one is just going to be on offering slaughtering services, which is kind of limited. So if you go through, the major equipment that you're going to need is that unit. You're going to need a truck to haul it around. And then you're going to need some smaller equipment like the holding pens, and then the cell phone computer for your staffing. When we look at the staffing that would be needed to operate this mobile slaughtering unit, you're going to need a butcher / manager. That manager is going to have to take on kind of two duties there, managing the whole operation, but also providing butchering services, because then you're going to have a second butcher, and those are going to be your two primary workers. And then your assistant is going to be helping with the cleanup process and then other duties that are other than butchering. And then of course, you're going to have a driver moving that unit out to different ranches. And then you go through your operating costs. So down on the second page, when you get into revenues, your slaughtering fees are, was it 150? Per animal on average, it's usually about $150 per animal. And with a slaughtering unit, you can really only operate this 2 days, 2 or 3 days a week, using those other 2 days of the week for cleaning and maintaining the unit. So the projected annual revenues when this thing is in full operation really isn't covering your operational costs. And the final, after the depreciation and then the loan payment for that initial capital investment, what we projected, this feasibility study shows net losses each year. You're very limited on your slaughter fees to be competitive, and then the amount of animals you can slaughter. So it doesn't show a very feasible option just to be operating a mobile slaughtering unit, just offering slaughtering services. So then in scenario 2, we expand that, still operating the mobile slaughtering unit, but then also purchasing animals from the producers to then take to a processor and offer that for retail or wholesale. The wholesale and retail would require a USDA or a chain of inspection if you're going to be selling to individuals that are not owners of the animal.
One question in regard to this, you're assuming there wouldn't be any need for like a rendering trucker services that would be taken care of on the ranch.
Yes.
Yes.
In regards to the estimated annual loan payment, you stated was 5%. Is that just an average, or is that what did you base that on?
That's based on what interest rates are moving towards, and looking at sitting on the board of your bank, knowing what loans are priced at this point. A little bit lower right now, but within a year or so, with the Treasury raising the rates, that interest rate's going to go up.
Thank you.
Okay, so scenario 2, like I said, you still operate the mobile slaughtering unit, but then the purchasing of animals for retail or wholesale, that's going to require an office building with freezer storage unit to be storing that meat products before delivery to purchasers. So when you look at the equipment side of scenario 2, it's very similar to scenario 1. You're just adding the freezer storage unit, and we estimated a 20 by 20 unit, and then an office building. And that office building would house your manager and your inspector, and then would also be located next to the freezer storage unit. So then when you go down, the staffing changes a little bit. The manager would be taking on more responsibilities, and he can't be a manager and butcher. And part of that is because the manager is going to really have to work on the sales side of the meat products, contacting customers, getting that whole chain set up and that customer base set up to sell these products. These products, selling these processed products would allow you an additional revenue stream in addition to just slaughtering at $150 a head. But this scenario 2 is very contingent on local processors being available to process this meat that is purchased into meat products. And currently, most local processors are backlogged a month to 3 months, some even more than that. And depending on the time of year, that backlog can be even larger. So you have your manager, and then you have your 2 butchers that are operating in the mobile slaughtering unit, and then your assistant and your driver. But then down in your revenue stream, you see that you've got your slaughtering fees, and those are dialed back from, I believe, scenario 1. Because then you got your taking your purchased animals to processors and then selling that boxed meat as to local customers. Sorry. So then when you get down to your bottom line, you know, a lot of this is always going to be dependent on the prices of the animal, the market of beef and bison. But your bottom line is still going to be showing a net operating loss, not as large as scenario 1. But that can also vary depending on the meat prices.
One of the issues in looking at this, as you read over the revenue sources, one of the major issues for the boxed meat sales is contingent upon, as Jeff was saying, the availability of processors to take on slaughtered animals. As we talk to most of the processors here locally, that's not the case. There is only one other USDA processor on the reservation right now. And so if you want to keep that chain of inspection in place, then if you're the slaughtering unit that is USDA inspected, you then need to take those carcasses to a USDA or a state inspected facility to maintain that so that you can have the ability to market that out. The difficulty with this option is, one of the difficulties with this option, there are several, but one of the difficulties is that there are not enough processors right now that have that inspection that you could get those animals into. So you might be slaughtering animals and have a waiting period to get them into a processing plant, or you may not be able to slaughter animals on a routine basis because you have nowhere to take them to get processed. The other thing is the inspection process requires the identification of the processing plant to be on the label. So it's technically not your processed meat that gets sold out. So when you deliver a carcass, slaughter a carcass under USDA inspection, deliver that to a processing plant, it's that processing plant's identification that is placed on the meat. So it's basically sold under them. You can get an inspection label that indicates this meat is processed for CSKT or whatever your name of the business would be, but it has to go under that label. That's a requirement to be able to trace back any and all meat products to the processor that dealt with it. So that's a difficult thing. Even though this looks like it comes close, our recommendation would be to stay away from this because it's got too many issues and concerns. So.
All right, then we'll go into scenario 3, which is the the final scenario that we prepared. And in this scenario would be the building and opening of a full slaughtering and processing plant at a fixed site. So we've stepped away from the idea of the mobile slaughtering unit, and all slaughtering services are operating on site at this fixed plant.
Before we go on to scenario 3, was there any questions on the previous scenario? Okay.
Jennifer, I see that Janet has had her hand up.
Oh, thanks. Do you have time for a quick comment?
Go ahead, Janet.
Thank you. So we initially asked Vern and Jason and Jeff to work on this feasibility study because of the issue that we have at the Bison range with needing to cull animals at least every couple of years. And the reason we looked into the mobile slaughter unit was because it's actually, the animal doesn't suffer as much if you can slaughter it in the field rather than bringing it in and then slaughtering it at a processing plant, because it's stressful on the animal to capture it and then bring it to another facility. So that was why we initially looked at this mobile slaughter unit, and also other tribes have been exploring this concept. But we were really grateful to learn that it's really not as cost effective as we had hoped it would be. And so I really appreciate that Vern and Jason and Jeff have been able to really dig into the numbers before we invest in such a facility. And I agree with scenario 2 also that the processors are very backed up, and trying to slaughter animals and then hold them until they can be butchered. That's been a very difficult experience that a lot of people have found throughout the valley. But I do have a question about the profitability. When you mentioned earlier, Vern, about the tribes maybe setting up a business and purchasing calves to finish them, we don't know what the profitability of that would be, because the ranchers are having a hard time holding calves over and fattening them up over the winter because of the cost of hay and other feed. So that is something we'd really want to explore further before we even looked at that potential opportunity of holding the animals and kind of at a feedlot. And so that's going to be one of the difficult things, as well as finding people to train up to become butchers. So I just wanted to bring that, we've got to keep these things in mind when we're looking at the feasibility of making this project work. So thanks for the opportunity to comment.
All right, thank you, Janet. That is a good point. I forgot about the operation at the Bison range, but yeah, that's something that we needed to take a look at, because that's going to happen more often than not. Anita, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment something that Janet brought up, and I know being a producer and seeing the markets are really hard. Because even if the people take and sell their animals in the fall, they're sent somewhere to finish. And I've seen people that did retain their calves through the winter up until the next fall. And at the time that ours were sold and that he decided to retain, I think about 200 head, it was probably about $1.20 to $1.30 a pound is what they were getting then. He retained his for an additional year to let him get to that 1,300 weight or whatever. He got $1.27 it was just pitiful, because he had an additional year into him, which means 2 years of operational costs. So what I was trying to say is the markets are really hard to compare to. You don't know from year to year. You kind of got to idea this year, it might be a little more higher, but you never know until fall. So
Yeah.
those costs fluctuate, so I just wanted to mention it.
Yeah, that is a good point also, Juanita, because of the fact that, well, with the cost of inflation, the markets are having a tougher time every year, so. All right.
So one comment about the Bison range. I spent some time down at the Bison range, and for two reasons. One, I went down and talked to Leonard Gray when he was down there to find out how many animals that they surplus in the fall and how they handle those animals. Last year, they auctioned them all off, so they all went out for auction. We found out about how much they got off of each animal in auction and the number that they surplused off. In further discussions, we've gone down and looked at the slaughter plant that used to be in operation at the range down there. Unfortunately, what it is right now is an empty shell. The interior of it is not in condition that you could get a USDA or get a grant of USDA inspection approved. You'd have to go in and spend considerable amount of money refurnishing or resurfacing the interior of the building. So it does not look like that would be feasible to build in for the range itself, for the number of animals that they would be surplusing, which was around 30 head last fall, I believe he said. The other issue with that is if you put the money in, invested the money into that plant to be your slaughter plant or be a slaughter plant for other animals, bringing those other animals onto the range, you would have to go right through one of the major pastures of the range unit itself. Shannon Claremont, your biologist, had some issues with that in that it may introduce some disease or infections to animals on the range from outside animals as they're transported to and from that plant. So there's very little to the plant. There's a ceiling rail system that's still there. There were a number of meat hooks, pulleys and meat hooks that are there. The facility never did have any chilling or freezer capacity. There's no refrigeration, never was any refrigeration, because when the Bison range did their slaughtering, it was in the fall. And so it was cool enough that they could slaughter those animals and let them hang and cool and chill before they hauled them out. So the carcasses out. So it's basically just a building, fairly large building, but it's not equipped anymore and would require a healthy investment to go into it. So as we looked at scenario 3, then incorporating your slaughter into the processing plant becomes the most efficient. You then don't have to have multiple employees scattered at different locations to do slaughtering and butchering. You can use your existing staff at the processing plant. So.
All right. Getting into scenario 3, we did extensive research on small plants. The size of the plant that we looked at for this operation would be 3,000, a little over 3,000 square feet. There's a lot of other tribes in areas like Oklahoma that have opened full processing plants, but you're kind of comparing apples to oranges when you're talking about a 25,000 square foot state-of-the-art processing plant to what we're looking at here. And some of our limitations are based on the amount of beef, bison, and hog production in the valley. So we looked at that too. So looking at the equipment list of this scenario 3, everything is pretty self-explanatory. except when you get down to plant equipment. And I just wanted to point that out because there's, in the final product, we do have an additional list that will break that plant equipment down. So, yeah. And then continuing on, you want to talk about the layout? Or what all is you? Okay. So then you got, your staffing is going to have to increase when you're operating a small processing plant. Obviously, you've got your manager, and the success of this project is heavily dependent on the manager you hire, that this person has experience with butchering and processing, but also is going to be working hard to get that product out there and get your customer base and establish a good revenue stream. You've got you're going to have an office. So you're going to have a secretary, administrative assistant, you've got your butchers, and then you've got your plant facility assistants. And then continuing through your operational costs down to the revenues. So kind of like what Anita was getting into earlier, your prices are going to vary each year. So usually when you're doing a feasibility study, when it comes to red meat production, your costs, you have to look at a historical, kind of get an average of the historical cost back. You can't just kind of go off of what's currently the trend of prices. So when we look at the cost of goods sold on this revenue stream, that's kind of where our numbers come from. And like I said, the final product will include all of our notes and sites and where we get this data. But we're looking at averaging 19 animals per week. We've kind of broke it down into beef, pork, and bison, and the number of bison is very limited based on the limited amount of bison available on the reservation, because most sellers are selling what?
Yeah, what we found in part of our surveys was that the producers of bison are selling most of their animals for replacement stock to other ranches. So instead of going to slaughter, they're going out for replacement bulls or replacement heifers. So it's just mainly the older animals that end up going to slaughter. There are a couple of producers here on the reservation that do send their animals, the majority of their animals, to slaughter, but they already have markets built. So to try to get into that and not marketing their animals, but you slaughtering and marketing their animals is probably going to be limited. So
Just a curiosity, how many slaughterhouses do we have on the reservation?
we sent out 10 surveys, and 2 of those came back as undeliverable. So we believe that they were not, we had no way to contact them. So there are probably 8 to 10 slaughtering facilities, not so much slaughtering facilities, but processing facilities here on the reservation. Most of them are operating as custom exempt. So they'll process wild game for you when you bring it in. They'll process your animal for your consumption, and they're not engaged in retailing or wholesaling any of the meat products out. Then there are 4 or 5, I believe, retail exempt, like Montana Marbled Meats, Frank's Meats, and a couple of others that purchase USDA slaughtered animals, and they can then do the value added products that they sell in their retail office, retail storefront. But that's pretty much what there is. There's only one other USDA inspected plant operating on the reservation at this point.
Okay.
All right. So the other side of the processing plant is also offering services for processing wild game for individuals. So as you see in scenario 3, you're offering a full scale of processing options in the valley, and then the push that we have, kind of get in the marketing plan is for this facility to be a USDA inspected facility. The reason we push that is as Vern mentioned earlier, you can sell across state lines. There's limited competition in the area. You can provide meat to retail exempt, or I should say retail exempt processors. And then from our surveys and studies is most grocers and schools request USDA inspected products. And then you can also do value-added products for retail. And I'll get into more detail as far as when we talk about value-added products, what we're talking about. But bottom line on this scenario 3, as you can see, between your revenue streams, selling processed meats, and then after you take out, even it's a large capital investment, but in a full operational plant, we're showing a pretty good net profit. Now, granted, in our business plan, we'll have a 3-year study, and obviously in your first year, I think we average about 50% revenue stream, and that slowly builds each month, as we mentioned, when that manager, gets out there and establishes that customer base, and then you can show that you're offering a quality product based on your staffing and your butchers and a consistent product, and that revenue stream can grow. And so this feasibility study kind of gets into year 3, maybe beyond year 3, but this is the projected revenues that you could have at a full scale operational plant.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Just a
Anita.
quick comment before I lose my thought, but when we were looking into this and talked about it, one of the things I think most people want to know, and even with the food sovereignty anymore, is where your meat's coming from. Right now, as indicated, most of the cow-calf producers sell their product in the fall, and then it's shipped over to Nebraska or Omaha, North Dakota, so, places like that. So it's 2 to 3 states away. So really, you don't know where your meat's coming from. I mean, they're saying they're buying it from Spokane, and I know when I worked at Mission, it came out of Seattle and all over. But I think one of the bases for the marketing would be that it is local, that it's fed, grass fed here locally, no hormones, kind of like Omaha meats or whatever. So the marketing would be the key. But I think what the big thing is, even with the new FDIPR laws and what schools can buy and what you can buy per ECS and even what casinos can buy, you could market it as that. And if it's homegrown and it's right here and processed, what you're getting. So that's just my thought, but thank you.
All right, thank you, Anita. Yes, Carol?
I just wanted to say, I noticed that Mission Mart used to buy meat from Mount St. Helens or St. Helens. And then just recently I noticed that they started buying from a place over in eastern Montana. And I told the butcher, I said, I'm glad that at least you're buying Montana beef, because you know what's in it when you get the beef from, like Walmart, and they buy it from Nebraska, it's corn, it has a different taste to it. So just wanted to point that out, that, people are looking at this, especially Montanans.
That's a great segue, Anita, for the next part of this presentation. In our marketing analysis, that's one of the key issues that what we feel that this plant should push, and also from Janet's proposal, when you're more, there's a study that shows projects in the next 5 years that this trend of grass-fed, grass-finished beef and also bison is just going to, the demand for it is just going to increase. So this would be a prime opportunity to serve that market. And so in our marketing study, we just did the study on the processing plant. We kind of put away scenario 1s and scenario 2. But there's parts of this marketing plan that will be in the final business plan, business product, that, if you do decide to go with a mobile slaughtering unit, you can take parts of this marketing plan and use that. But going through what we found in the marketing plan, that your target markets, your primary income for scenario 3 is going to be to sell processed meat products. And those would be either sold at the plant itself at a retail location on site, and then also selling products directly to schools, grocers, butchers, and then Northwest region restaurants, casinos, or casinos with restaurants. You're going to be starting small in your first year and second year, just trying to, the big key thing is to create that name in the brand. And once you can show that you can produce a quality product, then it's kind of the sky's the limit for the manager to expand that further out. And then the other markets for this processing plant would be tribal programs such as early childhood services, tribal senior citizen center, SKC3 wolves, and then also with the USDA inspected plant, there's the opportunity to get into federal government contracts. And I'll get into that a little bit later. And then secondary customers of the meat plant are going to be offering your processing services like during hunting season, or local producers that want to bring in beef for their own retail sale, or for their own sale, or for their own consumption. And then so I had mentioned earlier, we'd get into the products and services offered. So you would be offering USDA inspected slaughter, boning, grinding, portion cutting, curing, processed meats, manufacture and packaging services, sales of meat carcasses, sides, quarters, and boxed meat to like grocers or local butchers. And then plant-owned USDA inspected processed meats and value-added products. Those value-added products that we kind of listed out, like jerky, snack sticks, smoked meats, and then offering beef and bison cuts of ground, steaks and roasts. And then when you get into your hog production or hog processing, you can offer cured or smoked hams, cured or smoked bacon, which as a lover of bacon, I know bacon's popular. And then your pork sausage and other pork cuts. And then moving on through this marketing plan, there's a product volume and growth expectations. As I mentioned before, our feasibility study showed the feasibility of full operation of the plant, but we're very aware that, within your first 2 years, you've got growth, you've got job training, finding the employees to get your production at maximum production, but also just that marketing of this product. It's getting that name out there and showing that, what the customer wants, or just kind of getting your foot in the door, and this manager working to sell this product that's coming out of this plant. So usually in your first year, the production is going to be like, we were averaging 19 animals per week. In your first year, that's usually going to be half. And then your growth is going to be dependent on that manager getting the sales out, and then also the local producers, whether you're working contracts with local producers or their capacity, especially the bison issue. And then the other key thing about product volume is when this plant is designed, you'll always want to make sure that the plant should be designed such that the carcass coolers and refrigerated frozen storage can be expanded if added capacity is needed in the future. And then moving on to marketing budget and requirements. The first year, maybe first 2 years, is a lot of cold calling, getting involved with local cooperatives. Like we have the, where is it? Mission Mountain, what is that? Yeah, Mission Mountain Food Enterprise. And then finding other local distributors to help distribute your product, kind of like a partnership to distribute your product. But getting into labeling that product, from what we found out is whatever you put on that label does have to be approved by FSIS, USDA. And sometimes that can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years to get that label approved. And so that's another consideration that will have to be taken into effect when laying out the plan for this.
Quick question, what
Process.
is the acronym FSIS?
It's the part of USDA that does food safety inspection service. So that's what the FSIS is.
Okay.
Real quickly, Mr. Chair. I know at one time we talked about Intertribal Ag has already got their marketing assistance program. And it's also got the Indian made. I mean, they've already got that trademark out there. So a lot of this stuff, I think they could help us get into without jumping the hoops and it taking 2 years.
Yeah, that actually was my next paragraph. Yeah, because they've had that trademark and it's been successfully marketed since 1993. So that's another option. With regards to claims made on your label, grass-fed, grass-inspected, hormone-free, that stuff, that's the stuff that has to be approved by FSIS, USDA. But yeah, the Intertribal Agricultural Council is a good resource to use that gives you a unique marketing tool and the ability to separate your business separate from other regional competitors. Thanks, Anita. And then moving on, I'm just going to go into the competition. As all of our research has found, there is a need, and even the stuff that I've read out of Tester's office, there is a need for USDA inspected plants, smaller plants. A lot of the ones in Montana have been bought out, mothballed, because they can't compete against the big guys. But there is a lot of not just laws that are coming out or being proposed, but also grants that are coming out to help the small producers. So that's to operate a USDA inspected plant kind of gives you such a great advantage compared to what's offered, not just in the state of Montana, but regionally. Okay, and then the other advantage would be to operate a tribally operated business, because the federal government does have set aside funds to purchase meats for, like, the Department of Defense, supporting minority owned businesses. As long as you can provide the requested agreed amount quantity, that's almost like a guaranteed revenue stream each year. Oh, and then one more advantage would be to operate a Section 17 tribally operated business, because then you don't have to, in our feasibility studies, you notice there's no income taxes being shown. So and then the 3-year marketing strategy is going to be included in the plan, but that basically goes into the responsibilities of the manager and how aggressive the manager can market this product out there. So whether you're budgeting small or whatnot, I mean, it's really going to be dependent on the experience and the knowledge of this manager to get that product out there. You're going to have growth issues, you're going to have first-year issues, but the feasibility studies that we propose is after 2 to 3 years, you've made a name for this product, and they're starting to become a request instead of the manager having to push each year. I mean, it's always a job, a regular job for the manager to be pushing this product, but once you establish a name, like any of us who buy any kind of meat, whether it's in the grocery store or even at farmers markets, you know it by name. And if this plant develops a name for its product, then that's an easy sell for not just this region, but also pushing it out to other customers, casinos, restaurants, and others around the area. Because that's the other thing kind of touched on, maybe not really a little bit, but when you go out to eat restaurants that provide, they say this is grass-fed, grass-finished beef. We have a lot of tourists that come into Western Montana that's what they want. They come to Montana because they want a burger that's Montana beef or bison or elk. So that's easily something you can push to restaurants that you offer this product.
So kind of to wrap up here and get you back on schedule or close to your schedule. Our conclusion looks like option 3 or scenario 3 would be the feasible option to look forward to producing a business plan for you if unless you just adamantly want a mobile slaughter unit. We would leave that out of the business plan, that we would continue from here. So if there are any questions, we can attempt to answer. Yes, Carl.
Hope I was listening good enough. Anyway, my question is regarding the mobile slaughter. There was a unit, and I don't know if it still exists through White's Meats of a mobile slaughter, where the rancher will call you out, because I remember my stepdad doing this with White's. He would call White's over, they would shoot the meat and slaughter it right there. And there was no processing or anything, and I think they brought it back to White's, but I guess the concern always was, we made sure there was none of those chemicals, or it was grass-fed, grain-fed, and you always worried about making sure that you were getting back the beef that you sent there. And I'm sure it did happen, because, Pete's back there and his dad's probably watching out for all of us. Anyway, yeah, so that did exist. So would that still not be part of this at all? Is that what you're saying? Or are you talking about the big picture of a slaughtering unit going out?
We looked at basically at the feasibility of the slaughter unit, the mobile slaughter unit. The Montana, I think it's Montana Farmers Union, received a grant to purchase a mobile slaughter unit. I've talked to Mr. Raines several times about his plant and what they're attempting to do. They're attempting to get that mobile unit in operation. They bought a used one from, I believe it's out of Nebraska or Colorado, one of the two. Anyway, they've changed their mind a bit. They're not going to move that unit. And that's what we were finding in research, that most of these mobile slaughter units that were designed to go from ranch to pick up animals and do slaughtering had difficulty getting in and out of the ranches, for one, because this is a full trailer, semi-trailer unit. And it's expensive to move them around, especially with diesel costs as they are today. And the efficiency of them, once the animal is in that unit, is extremely good. But moving them in your slaughter day, you're limiting the number of animals that you can slaughter, because it's fairly time consuming and expensive to take that unit out and set it up, level it, get all of the operational components of it up and functioning to slaughter 1 or 2 animals, put it all down, get the unit and all of its contents ready to move again. And then the road conditions are a major factor. If you're able to move those around on paved roads or well-maintained county roads, it isn't too bad. But when you get into country roads, the rougher road conditions, you start vibrating all of the components. You get a lot more maintenance costs developed in it. So what most of them were telling us is they're doing 1 or 2 things. They're either setting them up right alongside a processing plant as a fixed part of their slaughtering processing plant, or they're moving them to a centralized location where the farmers and ranchers have to bring their animals to that location so that they're not moving around and they can process a number of animals. So the other point here is to keep in mind that we're in a little bit different weather condition than most of these operate in. So for at least a quarter of the year, snow conditions, moving these units around is extremely difficult. So we would propose that the operational portion of scenario 3 would allow for a medium-sized stock trailer and a heavy-duty pickup to pull that unit, so that in the event that a rancher or farmer didn't have the capacity or wanted you to come pick the animal up, you could come pick it up and then take it to your slaughter plant. And that would address those issues where individuals don't have the ability to get their animal to the slaughter plant. So.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Well, gentlemen, thank you for the report today. That was very, very interesting. You know, these are things that, you know, with the recent, or with us doing the bison range operations and also trying to address our food sovereignty initiative. This is something definitely that is needed. And unfortunately, we're looking at something like this right in the middle of the inflation going up and all the food costs going up. But regardless, it's something that would also benefit the membership. And I think that's what we need to really take a look at. Yes, Anita.
So they're looking for approval of the feasibility study and preferred scenario upon which to build a business plan. So is that what you're looking for today, is the consensus to go forward, or do you need action?
We just need a consensus, I believe, authorization from you to go forward and develop the business plan. We'll produce a business plan and a report project summary. Included in there will be all of the sources of information and contact information. Also included in the market study, what we did is we contacted all of the schools on the reservation, asked them for their input. They're all interested in acquiring meat from a plant if it's USDA inspected. We have a list of local restaurants and outlets, grocery stores and outlets, contact information, phone numbers, and so forth for each of them. We also went through and contacted all of the casinos with restaurants that we could find in the Northwest area. So looking at Washington, Idaho, and Montana. There are others that you could expand out, but that was what we limited our view towards. So we have contact information, phone numbers, and identification for each of those. All of that information will be coming in the report summary that we produce at the end of the project. So whoever is reading this or looking forward to develop will have access to all that research information.
All right, very good. And as I understood, it was you guys are recommending option 3 to move forward with that. Does council agree with that? Okay, I guess we move forward with option 3.
Thank you very much.
Okay, once again, thank you guys. It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
All right. Let's take a few minute break. I think the SK Technologies has a setup. You guys have to set some stuff up on. Well, we'll just take a few minute break here. Okay, I will call the meeting back to order. We will now go out of regular meeting and go into SKT shareholders meeting. I don't
Okay,
think.
Mr. Chairman, council members, we're here to make a presentation of our annual meeting.